in the consciousness paradigm, time is circular, not linear, which means that you could see the future because it's, in a sense, it's already happened. If it's circular and it's already kind of, everything is already there, of course you can see the future through this chakra, through the activation of this higher knowledge.
Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. I'm Deborah Burnt Maldonado, and I'm here with Dr. Rob Maldonado. We are the founders of Creative Mind University, and we're so excited about continuing our series on spiritual psychology. And before we begin today on our topic, which is how to use visualization in your spiritual practice, in your spiritual work, we want to remind you that we have a subscription here on the YouTube channel. If you click on that button in the corner, you will be able to get alerted for every new episode. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, iTunes, or any podcast hosting services, be sure to go in and click subscribe so that, again, you don't miss another episode of this fabulous podcast. So, visualization. Now, Rob, you know, this is my baby.
This is your wheelhouse.
This is my wheelhouse. I could talk about visualization all day. How visualization can be used for your spiritual growth, and why so many systems use visualization, coaches, therapists, healers, all the it's out everywhere. Even sports, they use it. And so we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, so I figured we could break it down into three spheres or areas of knowledge around visualization. One is, what is the brain doing when we visualize? Number two is, what is the mind doing? Which the mind is a little bit different than the brain. We can think of the brain as the hardware and the mind as the software. So what is the software doing when we are visualizing? And then we'll look at the spiritual practices and where these ideas come from about the mind in visualization.
And if you stick with the show, I will do a visualization so you can experience it directly. So let's start with the brain. You're the brain man, Rob. You can take this on.
Yeah, so we know that humans have, let's say, what makes us different from most of the great apes is the frontal lobes, or the prefrontal cortex. And that's simply this area right in back of your forehead, or that comprises your forehead. This little piece of, like, it's about the size of a small baseball or something like that. Makes all the difference. It's what allows us to use our imagination to think in terms of what are we doing, that self-reflective property that we have as human beings, that we're able to think about our own thoughts.
Well, if you think about humans, what we've created in the world versus an animal, you know, like we created technology, we went to space. So where does all that knowledge come from? It's from this additional tool that we have in our mind, in our brain.
Yeah, so the prefrontal cortex, executive functioning, that's where it resides. It is the traffic cop. It is the organizer. It is the CEO of the company.
The CEO of your life.
That says, let's focus on this, let's plan this, and do this, the intention to do those things. Planning, this is where it happens. Organizing, initiating, self-monitoring.
So is this kind of where the chatter is too in our mind, like where we're assessing and analyzing?
Yeah, I mean, nobody can really pinpoint those areas because it seems to be a function of the whole brain working together. Because if you think about chatter, it needs access to memory, right, to past experiences, and so it pulls from every part of the brain.
So would you say that the executive functioning is more like what we're conscious of? Like it's almost like a window into our unconscious through that. It's like kind of a doorway because it's like pulling from the unconscious, the parts of the brain, the memory, and then we're hearing thoughts and we're hearing, you know, part of that. would you say?
Yeah, that's right. And it's what we call intelligence, essentially, because it's the ability to use what we've experienced and learned from our past and put it all together.
And so self-monitoring would be, I really want to have that piece of cake, but I know I'm on a real healthy plan. I shouldn't eat sugar. So it's that ability to stop ourselves from taking action or choosing to go left or right or making decisions of what am I going to do today and or what am I not going to do. But also that, as we know, we're not always in full control of those decisions, but it's there and we want to cultivate it. Is that correct? Like cultivating that part of our mind.
Absolutely. And one of the theories of ADHD, which is so popular these days, or so common.
So popular. Yay! You have ADHD, and I do.
Well, a lot of creative people say that they have or were diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. One of the theories is that these frontal lobes are not doing their job properly. I mean, that's the clinical theory, right? That if the prefrontal cortex is not doing its executive functioning properly or up to speed, then things get disorganized.
It's like a lack of focus.
Lack of focus, lack of planning, lack of self-monitoring, which means the person appears impulsive, hyperactive.
Chaotic sometimes. Or just kind of jumping from one thing to the next. I wouldn't know what that is about. Or one conversation and then all of a sudden you're on another, have you ever had a friend that they're talking about something and then they go off on tangents? It's kind of like that lack of focus. And we all have it to some degree, but some people have it where it's debilitating, where it really impacts their life. And then the frontal lobe, by stimulating it through visualization, you can actually improve the focus, which actually wherever you focus, blood flows in your body. So when you're visualizing in a certain area, your blood will flow. That's why when we have a pain and we focus on it, it actually gets worse because we're putting more attention and energy into that pain. Like when we have a headache, we're not thinking of our feet. So I always say, tell our people, focus on your feet, put some feet in warm bath or whatever to move the energy. The same thing with ADHD. You focus on this area and you use that visualization of practice. It will help stimulate that part of your brain and the focus capability that you already have. It's almost like some people have to practice at it more, where it's easier for others to compartmentalize. And some people, and a lot of times too, creative people don't want to compartmentalize. They don't want to be so rigid and, okay, I'm going to do step A and B. The creative mind, that loose mind, really serves them in writing and stimulation and painting and all that. So.
Yeah, and there's pretty good evidence that we can shunt blood flow to particular areas of the brain, so that if we focus and visualize more blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, it will function better. And so, so the
creative people are back here in the back of the brain, like flowing, and then not enough focus on the frontal lobe. So that's very interesting. And then goal setting too with the executive functioning is to kind of set goals, like see into the future versus survival, where the lower parts of the brain are more about breathing, regulating the body. You're really thinking about, well, what do I want to do with my life and who am I and what goals do I want for myself?
So the second phase then is the mind. And the mind, like we said, the brain is the hardware, the mind is the software, meaning the programs that we run as social beings, what we think about ourselves, our capabilities, what we think about society, what's going on, the opportunities in our life. So here visualization then takes on a really important role, because if you look at sports, meaning athletes that are doing incredible things, the Olympians, people in basketball and football and high jumps, on and on, right? People in the sciences, people that are trying to solve very difficult problems and come up with creative solutions. Entrepreneurs, people in business, disruptors that create new ways of doing business, new ideas that, just transform society. As well as personal development, people in personal development, coaches who are helping others transform their lives. all these people, what they have in common is they know how to use this function of visualization.
Yes, Tiger Woods, when he was a little boy, his father had a hypnotherapist work with him on visualization. Michael Jordan would visualize every single game, every basket he made before every game. Einstein famously rode the light beam to come up with the theory of relativity. Edison would, when he came up with the incandescent bulb, he would do his little exercise, his little experiment. It wouldn't work, and he would lay down and actually go into a trance and visualize what the mechanisms, go back again, and then fiddle with it. And then if it didn't work again, he would use visualization. Like, what do I need to do? It's like tapping into some wisdom beyond just what you've done in the past. So very, very powerful. They did a study in high school where they told half the class to practice those jump shots, I think they're called, that one shot, that penalty shot. They would practice all day. And then the other half of the school would visualize practicing every day. And what they realized was that the mind doesn't distinguish between actual activity and visualization. So there was no difference. Those who physically practice and those who visualize. So that is so important. And think about that when you are visualizing, you're creating the foundation for your future in your mind. You're creating, your mind already thinks you've done it. It's also for executives, visualizing your talk before you talk. I worked with a lot with personal public speaking, and it kind of desensitizes because the mind already feels like, oh, I did this 1,000 times. I visualized it and I'm fine. So very, very powerful from all different, any type of whatever career you're in, whatever you want to create, visualization is really, really wonderful.
Of course, it goes back to this idea that our thoughts create our life.
Yes.
This is well understood now in psychology, in neuroscience, but it's also been a part of many spiritual practices and traditions for thousands of years. In Buddhism, we see it in Vedanta, in the Upanishads, this idea that our thoughts essentially translating to what we call our reality. And it's the pattern of thoughts, but also the intensity. So I think what visualization does, it creates a stage for in our mind that then we're able to kind of infuse these images that we imagine with that meaningful power of emotion, passion, that enlivens them.
You have to connect it to an emotion if you to really fuel it with power.
That's it.
And if you think about it, visualization, probably, people, when we were first in caves, visualization was like, it would be how we decided, should we go to the left jungle or the right jungle? And we visualize what kind of creatures would be there, and we're kind of planning ahead. So we've used it naturally for millions of years. So it's something that not many people until the human potential movement came out, where we consciously used it to change our life. And so that is just really incredible that this work, and it's so well researched too, visualization and healing your body, visualizing yourself being healed, feeling better. Very, very, very powerful. And the research is there to show that it's highly effective. Absolutely.
And think of the power. We're able to create these images, but it's more like a moving image, right? It's more like a movie that we're able to play forward, backward, then change it, thinking of impossible futures, and kind of consider all the possibilities from one scene. That power is underused in most people because most of the time, if you observe your mind, what it's doing, it's worrying about things. It's focusing on trying to solve particular problems. And often we let it imagine the worst possible case scenario instead of the best possible case scenario.
Why are you looking at me?
all our minds.
We all do that, yeah. It's like, what about the best case scenario? When you're worried about something, your mind, right, will...
Yeah, it's the default mode. In other words, problem solving is the default mode of the mind because it's survival.
That's so. I love that idea that problem solving is a default, a deep default, but creative is something that we have to kind of work on and cultivate. So, what about the spiritual aspect of visualization? Are we going to go to other dimensions and travel in amazing places?
Well, we know the best example comes from the tantric tradition and the chakra system. The third eye, or the prefrontal cortex in the chakra system, is called the ajna chakra. And the ajna is that sixth chakra, and the idea is that the subtle energy. Now, this is subtle energy, meaning, in the West, we're always looking for organs that correspond to the chakras and stuff. But there is something to that. But
it's not
the
physical.
original text, we're really talking about subtle mental, psychological, emotional energy that is imagined. In other words, it's visualized.
So I can't touch your chakra, Larry?
The visualization corresponds to the way the ancients saw the mind body as consciousness, not as a physical structure made out of material. They saw it more as this.
Would you say it's energy or not really?
Well, it depends how you define energy. But subtle, it does have subtle energy, of course, because we know.
But it's not like hard energy, like force.
Yes, it's
like a storm, or that kind.
Yeah.
Or an emotion is more of a tangible energy, right?
Yeah, it's a difficult. Let's say it's a difficult construct for Westerners because we're used to thinking of matter and energy as separate things. But even Einstein kind of pointed out that it's the same thing essentially. Matter is made up of energy, and if you break it apart, if you release the energy, you see that it's powerful energy that's there.
And then there's the kind of levels of energy, like more subtle energies and more kind of tangible energy, or is it all the same? I'm asking you these tough questions.
Yeah, it's okay because these are the kind of questions that come up. But let's focus on what the spiritual practices say about this sixth chakra, because that's the good stuff.
Okay.
So in this sixth chakra of Ajna, it is associated with higher knowledge. The higher knowledge was distinguished from lower knowledge in this, that higher knowledge informed you and taught you about the true self. In other words, the true nature of your mind body, who you really were. The self, we can say in simple terms, is consciousness, pure consciousness. It is what allows you to be aware, what allows your body to exist. It is pure being, pure consciousness, and pure bliss. It is also associated with what we call intuition. But intuition for the ancients was a little bit different. It was the ability to create your reality in a conscious way.
Versus just foretell the future.
Yes.
Like looking at the fixed default past and the basically default future. This is about intuiting a new future, a new conscious direction of your life.
Yes, because in the conscious paradigm, time is circular, not linear, which means that you could see the future because it's, in a sense, it's already happened. If it's circular and it's already kind of, everything is already there, of course you can see the future through this chakra, through the activation of this higher knowledge. It's also associated with cosmic vision. Now, this is higher consciousness or samadhi, nirvana.
Is this like a self-realization? Like
self-realization, self-actualization, full potential. We were talking about the human potential movement this morning. That's what they were aiming at. How do we realize the full potential of our mind body through this chakra. Is one of the techniques. Imagination, of course, and creative visualization, meaning the ability to give form to reality through the imagination, through visualization.
Well, and I always knew that when I visualized, it was kind of like coming from that place, but it just really makes things so clear that this part of our brain is actually helping us visualize. And it's, and I know the vision of the back of the, our eyes see, with the brain, that part is back here. But the vision that we're talking about is not through our eyes. Yeah. So we're having this different experience of not seeing out our eyes, the senses, through the material senses, we're actually seeing from another place of our mind. Yeah. So, it's interesting. So
it is the inner light. Now, in the tantric tradition, which comes from the Upanishads, ultimately, it is it's one of those schools that evolved from the Upanishads. The way transmission was accomplished, meaning direct transmission from the guru or teacher to the pupil, student, was through this chakra. That
kind of like
your sixth chakra, your third eye, was essentially a receiver of the transmission that the guru was putting out to receive that higher knowledge.
So, but we're not in a material universe, so how does that work? When you say transmission.
So the concept of consciousness universe does not mean that nothing exists. It means that what you are seeing as matter, as material, is consciousness itself. So simply taking the shape, the form.
So is the guru representing a part of our consciousness that's reminding us of what we already know, in a way?
That's right.
It's kind of awakening that individual consciousness with the higher knowledge that is already in there, but the guru's kind of playing the role. It's almost like a relationship where you fall in love and you think the love is coming from that person, but you already have the love inside. So, but it appears as if the guru is transmitting it, but their presence is awakening that within you. Would you say that would be a good way to describe it?
In the Jungian spiritual psychology, it is spoken of as this participation mystique, that we are participating in our own creation through the enactment of ritual and through the enactment of meditation and visualization.
That's so amazing. That's great. So should we practice a little visualization so they can get a feel before we go? One of the things about visualization is that you don't really need to do a deepener or go deep, relax yourself to do it. Although you can do a progressive relaxation if you want to go deeper. But when you visualize, you're automatically in a trance. You're automatically in a kind of an altered state. So when you're driving, have you ever noticed you're driving a long distance and we're on the same road for work and you automatically turn off, but your mind is visualizing. It's like your whole body is relaxed and not, unless we're visualizing something stressful, you're kind of like imagining maybe your vacation and you're just kind of in that drifty place. You're still awake and still conscious, but it just lowers your blood pressure. It does so many things physiologically to visualize. It helps your mind body kind of get into that relaxed state. So when you close your eyes and visualize, it's even a deeper state. Your mind automatically shuts out the external distractions and turns inward. So if you're not driving, if you are driving, keep your eyes open. If you're not driving, close your eyes for a moment. And I just want you to imagine a door in front of you. And just picture what the door looks like. Is it a modern door? Is it an ancient door? How big is it? What color is it? What does the knob on the door look like, or handle? And I want you to think about on that door appears the words 1 year from today. And when you open that door, I want you to step into 1 year from today, what your life as you choose would want to look like. So open the door And you're going to step into a void at first. It's going to be empty of any information. It's just going to be like a white space. And then I want you to slowly start thinking about what 1 year from today would you like to experience in your life? Is there a relationship that you want? Is there a career change that you want? A health shift that you want? And I'm going to give you like just a couple seconds to just kind of quickly visualize your future self in 1 year. You don't have to make it perfect. Just whatever shows up is fine. And then come back into the door into today's date. You can close the door and know that you can come back after you listen to this. You can go back and practice again and make it longer. But that's just a really simple way. Say you want to start planning for the future, and you know, so many people, they don't know what they should have for goals. And sometimes when you do this type of visualization, it opens up ideas that you didn't even know. Do you want to share just that one time you had that vision of you speaking in that auditorium and how it showed up for you?
Oh,
do you remember
yes,
that?
Yes. But I have a better story.
Okay.
This is when I was...
He'll tell that story another time.
Yeah, when I started as a psych student way back when the world was still covered in ice, the department had brought a speaker to the department as part of the program. Like they would just bring speakers from the community. And the night before, I had this dream of this eagle that had landed on a branch that I was sitting up. I was up on a tree, apparently. And the eagle was so particular that I was fascinated by it. It had all these spots on it. And I kept thinking, what a rare eagle this is. It has all these spots on its feathers. It was one of those big dreams. It wasn't just
like a numinous quality. Right?
Yeah, it was one of those vivid dreams that this is saying something important. So that day I went to school, and in the department they announced that there was a speaker, but his name was it sounded almost like an Irish name, O'Gorman or something like that. And so I walked in, and there was this Native American guy with braids, and he was talking about his culture and how they would do these vision quests and these rituals that were, traditional in his culture. Fascinating talk. And then at the end, some of us walked up to him, and he was telling us a little bit more intimate stuff. And he said, that's not my name. That's my Christian name, but my real name is Spotted Eagle.
Oh, my God.
And then I understood, this is why it's so hard for psychology to study these things. Because the dream didn't tell me you're going to meet somebody that is has an Irish name, but is really called Spotted Eagle. The symbol just kind of presents a big clue as to what's important that's coming up in your life.
Ah, yeah.
And so in psychology, this would be very difficult to study as a study, let's say to do an experimental study on this. But we know it's a function of the human psyche.
And where does that come from? It didn't come from your conditioned mind. It came from this creative, spiritual, numinous, mystical part of yourself.
Yes.
With the wisdom?
Yes, we know there's a very strong connection between parent and child, right? So that often mothers know when something's up with their kids. Strong connection between lovers, husband and wife. Strong connection between friends and teachers, gurus, and students, right? That they often share this connection,
and they have dreams, similar dreams. And
yes. Someone
was just asking us in our group that them and their husband are having similar dreams or having same things. And what is that about?
It is through this chakra or through this inner eye, the mind's eye, that we connect with each other in this way. And of course, people that are on this spiritual path are connected. And so often when I would travel in my youth, and I'd be in cities that I didn't
like
know
you've been
anybody.
there.
Often I would run into people that we felt that connection. We felt that same, that we were on the same path, and we would help each other, or they would help me.
Yeah,
and I would help them.
There's certain students that we've been, connected with for years, and there's just something about them that we kind of have this kind of community, a tribe with people that just kind of like we can't describe it.
Yeah,
so anyway,
we often tell our students, right, that they are closer to us than our blood family because of this connection, that we are doing the same process.
Yeah, it's expanding what's possible for our human life, and visualization is just one of them. We're going to talk about some other practices, but just to sum up, the three parts of the visualization: the brain, the mind, and the spiritual element, the chakra. All of these pieces to visualization are powerful. And I invite you to go and visualize that door a little more. Like spend a little time. We couldn't have a lot of dead air on a show, but do go back and visualize like what your future will be. Write it down. And I promise you, a year from now, you'll look back at that date and be like, wow, all these things came true. Like 80% of your goals or that you visualize actually come true if you write them down. So very powerful. We're so powerful to create our own destiny. And visualization is a critical tool to allow that to happen. So thank you again for joining us. Wanted to just remind you again before we go, subscribe to our channel in the corner here if you're on YouTube, or if you're listening to us on our podcast services, click subscribe. We can't wait to see you next week.